Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, which was part 1, we have studied about what is what is mean by full stack developer and how client and server software, front end and back end and database works, advantage and disadvantages of being a full stack developer. And then we have one by one, we have covered front end, back end, full stack, DOM, APIs, encryption, decryption, HTTP, HTTPS, protocols and port numbers, TCP versus UDP, CI/CD, UI, responsive web pages, single page application, user experience, serverless, development, backend operations, request response, HTTP methods, CRUD operation, caching, CLI, virtual machine, and databases. This much we have already covered in part 1. Let us move toward part 2. So in this video, we will be covering from 26 to 50. So let us start then. XML. XML is the short form of extensible markup language. So in this, it is just a way of transferring data over the internet. So if you will observe here, we can provide user-defined opening and closing tags. And it is similar to what we have in HTML document. But in the HTML document, we cannot provide user-defined opening and closing tags. Also, one disadvantage with XML is when we are exchanging information using XML between client and server. So in the client side, every time when we receive the XML, we have to process it. We have to parse it basically, and then convert it into an object model tree. And then we have to search for some information, some specific information into it. So that all this process of parsing, reading, and searching for certain information makes the process slower, or we can say it as heavy-weighted. That is why XML is called heavyweight solution or the slower solution. Also, for processing it, we will be needing certain libraries because it is not straightforward to process XML. But there is a new alternative. So since last 15 years, XML usage has drastically dropped, and the new default convention has become JSON. So what is JSON? JSON is JavaScript object notation. So as you can see that it is basically the object notation in JavaScript language. So we can say that in the browser technology, like most of the frameworks, almost all the frameworks of the browser technology is using JavaScript these days. And if we receive the data from the server in the form of JSON, so we don't need to parse it. It is already in the object notation format. So JSON is provided in this kind of format. So let us say if we have to display some information in our table, and the information it is in this way, like there is an array, and there the array is of object of arrays, arrays of object, and each of the objects are basically, there are 3 objects are having some key and value pairs. Okay, so what will happen is we can display all this information in the table directly. We don't need to parse it or process it. So that is why JSON is lightweight. It is language independent also, and it is also the easier way to transmit the database. There is one more format which is called JSX. I'll not go into much detail. JSX or JavaScript XML is basically used specifically in React.js or React Native. JSX allows us to write HTML in React.js. So it is very specific to React.js. So let us say in React.js, if we want to create an element, something like this, that there is a UL and there are 3 LIs or list inside the ULs. So we can just create it in XML format, okay? And then we can use it in our JavaScript code. Okay, so this is another format of representing the data. Okay, 29th topic is firewall. Firewall is a security mechanism. It basically monitors and controls the incoming and outgoing requests or traffics from the computer. And based on some predetermined security rules which you have set for your computer or network, the firewall will block or allow some of the traffics. So let's come to the term number 30, which is IP address. So we all know what is IP address. IP address is basically a unique address through which our computer in the intranet or the internet is identified. So IP address is used when two system or two computers in a network wants to communicate with each other. Okay, so let us say if we are planning or we are loading www.google.com. So what is happening in the backend is there is no server with the name google.com basically. So it is just like how we have our mobile phone. In our mobile phone, we have our friend's name saved in the contacts, and with the name we have associated the number, the mobile number of those friends. Okay, so when we are calling, let us say, our friend John, so what is happening, we are not actually calling the name John, we are calling the number associated with the name John. So in the same way, when we are loading www.google.com, so we are not exactly opening google.com, we are opening an IP address associated with google.com. So who tells or who converts the IP address, the domain name into the IP address? So that is a task of domain name system. So there is a server which is available all the time, and there is also a caching mechanism with that server, so that so basically the DNS task is whenever we are requesting for a website, we first go to the DNS and find that corresponding to that domain name or the website name, what is the IP address associated. So based on the IP address we have received from the DNS, we then request to those IP address. Our request goes to the server with that IP address. So please note here that if we are requesting a particular website again and again or several times in the day, then there is no point again and again going to the DNS the same information. So what we can do is we can store such information in our cache. Let us move to the point number 32, which is IPv4. So there are two mechanisms to define or to provide the IP address. The IPv4 or IP version 4 is the older method, and in this what is happening is we have 4 parts, and each part varies from number 0 to 255, and there are 4 parts. So you can say that this IP address is of 32-bit. Why? Because each segment or each part, each 4 part is of 8-bit, 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 8-bit. Why 8-bit? Because the number in each of the segments or part can vary from 0 to 255. So basically 256 values are possible, and if you observe, 2 to the power 8 is nothing but 256. That is why this IPv4 IP address takes 32-bit integers, or we can say that 32-byte 4-byte integers. Okay, the new way of defining IP address is IP address version 6. I'll not go into much detail, but just I'll tell in the short is, in this we can define IP address in 128-bit address, and obviously we can define lot more number of addresses. So for example, this IPv4 can define 4.3 billion addresses, but this defines almost like 7.9 into 10 to the power 18 billion addresses. So you can see that, it is 4.3 billion, it is 7.9 into 10 to the power 18 billion. So it is like huge. It can define, I think, more IP address than we will ever need basically. And also the IP address defined by this, or shown by this IPv6 is quite complex, and it is very, very long as compared to the simple IP address we all are kind of habituated with. So this is a new mechanism of defining IP address. I think we have not moved our whole system into it. We are still using IPv4 for the most of our practical purposes. Now let us come into 34 point, which is proxy server. So what is proxy server and reverse proxy server? We will look in both the concepts together. Proxy server is also called forward proxy server or forwarding proxy server. So here what happens is, just imagine in this way that you are in your school, and a school has, let us say, 100 computers, and a school doesn't want basically outside world to know that which of the 100 computer is requesting what. Okay, so let us say the 100 computers are number 1 to 100, and the computer number 50 is requesting facebook.com. So what will happen is, without a proxy server concept, what will happen is 50 server, the computer number 50 will send a request to facebook.com, and facebook.com will send back the response to computer number 50. But with the proxy server in place, what will happen is computer number 50 will first send the request for the facebook.com to proxy server. Proxy server will hide the information that computer number 50 is sending this request. It will keep this information to itself, and it will send the request to facebook.com server, or the IP address corresponding to the facebook.com server, as if the proxy server is requesting to the facebook.com. And once it has received the response from facebook.com, it knows that this response is for computer number 50. So it will use the information it has saved about who requested for it to send back this information to computer number 50. So what it is doing is, if you will observe closely, proxy server basically is hiding the information of client from the server. I'm repeating again, proxy server is hiding the information of client from the server. Exactly opposite to is reverse proxy. Reverse proxy server hides information of server from the client. So just imagine it in this way, like I'm using my mobile phone, and I'm requesting for facebook.com. So what is happening is, there is a load balancer or a primary gate server, okay, which is taking the request that, okay, this mobile phone is requesting for facebook.com. And obviously facebook.com is such a large website, like such a it is handling such enormous amount of traffic. So there will be thousands of scaled servers, okay, which will be serving this kind of request. So my request is going to, let us say, server number 1001, and that server is returning the request to the load balancer, and that load balancer, or let us call it as reverse proxy server, is sending that information back to my mobile device. So in this way, what is happening is, the information that about the server, that which server is returning me the response, is hidden from me. So this is the role of reverse proxy. So if you closely look at this diagram, it will become clearer to you. In the forward proxy system hides the identity of the client. So here it is the internet. Here there are lots of clients, and this proxy server is basically sending the request on behalf of all the clients to the outside world. But in the reverse proxy system, client is on the internet, and when it is sending the information, sending the request to the reverse proxy is fetching the required response from one of the server, but it is hiding the information that from which server it has received the response. So this is reverse proxy. Let us come to the point number 36. which is VPN. VPN, the full form is Virtual Private Network. Here, VPN protects your internet connection and privacy online. So let us say if you are using some public internet and you want to open some websites which need your authorization or the password. So it is unsafe to pass your username and password from such public internet, because lots of people are using, and there might be some gateways and routers which can be easily intercepted by the person who is owning that public internet, or the internet which is shared by many of the people. So in such situation, what we can do is we can use VPN softwares. Okay, VPN software basically creates a tunnel for your data, encrypted tunnel for your data. So all your information which is going outside from your laptop or computer is basically encrypted, and that way it will protect your online identity by hiding your IP address, by hiding your contents which is going and getting received by a computer. Okay, so let us move to the 37. So Nginx, it is pronounced as Nginx. Okay, it is a powerful open source server which can act as proxy server, reverse proxy server, DNS, web server. So lots of companies are using this Nginx as proxy server or routers. Okay, so maybe you should look at it. There are lots of free tutorial available for this over the YouTube. Point number 38 is Apache. Apache is basically an umbrella organization, or we can say it as, there is a Apache Software Foundation, which maintains and manages lots and lots of more than hundreds of softwares which are purely free for everyone. And there are some very, very good softwares on frameworks like Apache HTTP server, which is one of the most used HTTP server or web server. Apache Hadoop, Spark, Tomcat. Tomcat is used by lots of companies and organization. Kafka, Cassandra. Cassandra is a very good NoSQL database. Kafka is PubSub framework. So there are lots of frameworks which are basically managed by the Apache Software Foundation. Term number 39 is Sudo. Sudo is basically, it means super user do. So it has two purposes. One is when we will prefix the sudo with any of the command, then it will ask for your password and it will authorize you to pass those commands if you are not already authorized to do that. Also, it is used for changing the user. So when somebody says that, okay, if you're not permitted to execute some of the command or some of the programs, then use sudo to execute it. So sudo is nothing but a command to execute some authorized or authorized commands. So let us look at this. So for example, in your terminal, if you are in your Linux terminal, if you are passing the command reboot, it is saying that reboot can only be passed by the super user. Then you will do sudo reboot and it will ask for the password, that are you authorized to pass the reboot using sudo? So you will say yes, and then it will reboot the system. Okay, so you can just prefix any of the command with the sudo and execute it. Okay, term number 40 is web scraping. So web scraping is a process of extracting some useful information or information of your interest from the websites. So let us say if there is Amazon.com and you want to scrap or extract all the information about all the types of mobile phones available in the Amazon.com. So how you will do that? So you will use any one of these frameworks like Puppeteer or Selenium or Beautiful Soup. So using that, you will load each of the page in the Amazon.com, and once you have loaded it, you will read its document object model, and from there you will identify that, okay, the name of the mobile phone is using this particular class or ID in its DOM elements, and then you will fetch all those kind of elements, and one by one you will basically iterate over it and collect it and save it somewhere. Okay, so this is how we use web scraping. Term number 41, Git. Git is very important in any of the organization where multiple people work on a same project. So let us say if 10 people are working in a project and all the 10 people are basically writing some code on a daily basis and checking in those codes, and those codes are basically deployed to the production or the stage environment or the testing environment. Okay, so such things becomes very difficult without the source code management. So what is source code management? Source code management is a framework, we can say, or a mechanism, we can say, where different user can make a pull request for a particular code base, and they can create their own branch or their own version of that code base, and there they can make progress or write their own implementation or develop some features. And once they have developed it, they have tested it locally, they can push their code and merge their code to the main code base. So if there are no conflicts in the code base, in the branches, then it will be merged. And once it is merged, so we will have a new code base or a new master code base. So this all are handled by the softwares. Such softwares are called SCM, or source code management software. Okay, so Git is one of the most popular SCM software. Okay, so there are different other varieties like Bitbucket, and there is one more, I think CloudBit or something like that. So they also use very similar mechanism to the Git. Number 42 is cron jobs. Cron jobs are nothing but if you have to perform a particular task repeatedly on a scheduled basis. So what you will do is you will write the implementation or the workflow of those tasks, and then write a cron job for that task. So cron job is nothing but a scheduled task or a scheduled time-based task which will execute on certain interval of time until you stop it. So let us say if you want to execute some automation framework or some test every Monday morning, so you can write a cron job that will execute the jar file or the framework main file. Okay, so term number 43, environment variable. So it is one of the most common things which we generally do in the day-to-day basis, is that setting the environment variables. So what it does is, let us say when in the command terminal, when you are writing some command. So let us say when you are writing some command like for executing a Java, so you are writing Java or Java C. So as soon as the command terminal sees that Java C or Java, it starts searching for where exactly the executable file for Java or Java C is there. So the first of all, by default, it will look at path environment variable. Okay, so when you are installing JDK or JRE in your system, you should update that path of the JDK binary in your path variable. Okay, so by default, each of the executable will look for its path in the path variable. Similar to that, different software uses different environment variable, and while installing that software, it will set an environment variable corresponding to its usage. So environment variable are nothing but a key value pair that are set before a command terminal starts. So whenever a new command terminal starts, it sets all the environment variable which you have set for the system. And such keys are basically looked upon by specific programs. By default, path is the environment variable which is looked upon. Term 44 is automation. So when you will work on any organization or any project, so what will happen is you will have to write automation for certain things, like automation for testing some functionalities, automation for testing some web applications, and so on. So a collection of such test cases are called test suites. So test suites will contain lots of test case 1, test case 2, test case 3, which will have something common in them. So there will be lots of test cases in test suite 1. Similarly, there will be test suite 2, in which lots of other test cases will be there. Okay, and the automation will be collection of all such test suites. So whenever we say that, okay, launch your or run your automation every week, so what we do is we run all our test suites every week to identify if there is any failure in our system or not. Okay, if there is no failure, very good. If there is failure, go debug the issue, see if this is a real issue, or the failure is because of some real issue or not. Term number 45, unit test. So whenever we are developing something or writing some functions, it is always a best practice to write unit test case during the development only. So whenever we are, let us say, implementing some feature, at that time, our mind is very fresh about what exactly this feature is going to do. So it is a best practice that during that time only, we will write some unit test case, which will identify whether our function or the feature is doing the expected things or not. So let us say if I have written a function for let us say finding area of rectangle. So if let us say my function is area, it takes length and breadth. So what I will do is I'll write, let us say, unit test case. So for my first unit test case would be whether the length could be 0 or not. The second unit test could be whether my breadth would be 0 or not, what it is returning. Or let us say, what will happen if my length and breadth are very large, or something like that. So whenever I want to test whether this feature is working or not, I will launch all the unit test case to see that whether my feature is working correctly for all the cases or not. Number 46 is DevOps. So DevOps is the combination of development and operations. So each team has some team members who are dedicatedly working on the development of the project, and some team members who are working on the operations. Operations means the part which handles the deployment, the operations, the monitoring of the deployments and all. So when we combine both the development and operation, it becomes DevOps. So you can go through this diagram, like, which of the software is used on which of the stage. So first we plan for any of the feature, then we code that feature, then we build that feature, then we test, automate, then we write test using the automation, then we release those features, and then it is deployed in the production or stage or whatever situation. And then it is, the operation teams or the operation stage is taken care by the different softwares like this. And then its operation is monitored, like the downtime or the failure or the crashing of any of the deployment. So these things are handled by these softwares. You can look at each of them. And I advise that you look at the definitions for each of them. It's they all are very much used in all the big organizations. Term number 47 is about IDEs and client software. IDEs are nothing but integrated development environments. And these are basically the development environments for any of the programming language or frameworks. So Eclipse or NetBeans or PyCharm or IntelliJ. So there are different IDEs which are used these days for different programming interfaces and all. And similar to that, we have client software. So what are client softwares? For different purposes, we have different softwares. So let us say for accessing the web, accessing the internet, we have browser. So we will say that browser is our client software for web technologies or web. Similarly, let us say for playing videos, we have some media player. So we will say that media player is the client software for playing media files. Okay, so these are client softwares. Term 48 is Postman. Postman is a software or is a desktop application which is used for testing or basically executing some HTTP methods like get, put, post, and delete and all. Okay. Similarly, just for enhancing or improving our productivity, we can install different extensions in our browsers. So, for example, in the Chrome browser, we can have lots of extensions. So you can just search for some extensions in the Google search, like extensions for getting the RGB code for any of the color, extension for uh, you know finding correct music of your choice, extension for removing the elements from the web page, extension for blocking the ads from the YouTube or any of the website you are visiting. So there are different types of extensions, okay, available. So there are some technical extensions also for blocking the course feature and all. So I'll not go into much detail, but extensions are a good feature and you should look upon it. Number 49 is very, very important. It is browser developer console. If you are a front-end developer, then you should be using browser developer console very often. It is a very powerful tool. I have a dedicated video on the browser developer console. I'll provide the link in the description. Please go through it. So in this, every browser has browser developer console, which will have different tabs, and each of the tab will show the details about particular topics. So for example, element tab will show all the elements in that particular page, all the window elements of that particular page. Network will show what all network request which came to that particular browser tab. Similarly, source will show you all the source code of the source files which are loaded for that current tab, and so on. So you can just look upon it. It is a very powerful tool, and I strongly advise you all to dig more deeper on this browser developer console. Last term is term number 50. It is about documentation. So in each of the development team, documentation is given very high priority, because when you are developing or doing some work, it is always best practice to document your work, because over the time you will yourself forget what you have done, and for other team members to look upon your work, it is also always better to have all your work documented. So documentation can be done into different softwares. The most common used are Confluence, okay, Confluence, or wikis. So we write Confluence pages, like we create a page where we can just write details about our projects. We can attach some files, we can attach some images or some diagrams and all, and then we can create a document. Different people can contribute to it. We can have we have a mechanism to see what all changes have been made over the time on it. So such documentation frameworks are there, which are most commonly used are Confluence and Wiki. Similarly, we have a Jira, or some people call it Jira. So Jira is a framework to monitor your progress or the task. So here is a sample window of Jira for a person, Taylor. And so you can see that, on Monday, he has started his, so this is the date of the Monday, and for 8 hours of the time, what all things he will do. So these are called tickets, or the, issues, or the stories we call it. So the person, whoever has assigned him the task, he will write a story that what all things he has to do. And he will assign that story or the task to the person Taylor, and it will start appearing on his daily schedule. So it is just like a day planner or something like that. So it is used in all the organization to check and to monitor the productivity of a person. So this is the framework Jira, and you can just get a good view about what all tasks you have done this week, last week, over the year, over the month, and so on. It is always best practice to maintain readme file or a description file for any of your project or any of the work. So whenever, let us say, you are checking your code in any project, so always put proper comments, remove all the debugging statements, maintain a good readme file where all the details will be provided. So these are some good practices. So these are the quick 50 terms which I found which are most commonly used in any of the job or any of the full stack development profile. So I have shared all those 50 terms with all you guys. If you like this video, or if you feel that there are some more terms which needs to be discussed, then please comment below, and please share this video, like this video, and if you liked all this information, then subscribe to this channel if you have not so far. So thank you, and thank you once again. It's night time, and thank you.